Hello, baby. Hello, rock and roll. Welcome back to Jay's Rock and Roll Stories. I am your host, Jay. Hey there. I got something for you today. Let me explain. If you had listened to the New York Dolls episode, and if you had listened to the Sid Vicious episode, yes, we talked a lot about the Sex Pistols. And, I explained in the episode about death metal how I like to jump around the buffet table, but I'm sticking around the same. I might be piggybacking a little bit, but what the hell, rock and roll. Today's episode is Steve Jones, the lead guitarist, of the Sex Pistols. And my initial idea, because I was always curious about this. I know Steve Jones, the Sex Pistols. I know that story. But I've always known that after the Sex Pistols, he went on to do, he was very big in that like 80s hair metal scene, in LA, and he was partying with Guns N' Roses and shit. And I always thought what the hell is that all about? So my episode was going to be focused on that, but after reading this book, it's called Lonely Boy: Tales from a Sex Pistol, the autobiography of Steve Jones. I just wanted to give the whole shebang, and there's some interesting stuff about his life, and so we're just going to start from the beginning. I'm just going to give a story about him, and we're just going to brush over the Sex Pistols stuff, and then we're going to move over to his post musical world, because we know a lot about Sex Pistols already if you've been listening to the New York Dolls episodes and the Sid Vicious ones. Anyway, Steve Jones. Steve Jones was born in England in 1955, and he explains in his book that his mom and his dad split up early when he was a baby, and he was with his mom, and his dad left. He explains in his book that his dad was a teddy boy. And rock and roll was always involved in his life. What is a teddy boy? A teddy boy is this is not something that happened in the States. This is very English. So let me give you a good quote that I found when I was reading the Beatle Who Vanished by Jim Birkenstadt, because he was talking about how when Jimmy Nicol was a teddy boy. So here's a good definition. This gives you an idea of what his father was, what Steve Jones' father was, and musically where he kind of came from in this period. So Steve Jones, born in 1955. So listen to this real quick. What is a teddy boy? Post-World War II, Great Britain faced a complex series of problems that lasted well into the 50s. There was the task of rebuilding homes, businesses, factories, schools, hospitals that had been bombed by Nazi Germany. Additionally, Britain faced high unemployment, rationing, long-term debt, and the related problems of inflation. Much of Britain's infrastructure that had survived the war needed updating. Factors such as high unemployment, the national debt, the collapse of the British Empire in the post-war years left a new generation of young people unemployed and directionless. Typically, many of these young men would have been conscripted into the army or employed in factories, but now they are seemingly adrift. Left to find their own direction to adulthood, what lay ahead was a rebellious and creative course. This new social order gave rise to a unique identity created by these youths labeled Teddy Boys, or Teds. They gained infamy by forming gangs and a sort of mantra of this new working class was live fast, die young. So, going back to young Steve, born in 55, just raised by a single mom. The mom has a couple boyfriends here and there, and he has a stepdad. When young Steve is 10 years old, the mother is in the hospital recovering from a miscarriage. So Steve's home alone with his stepdad, and his stepfather ordered Steve... Okay, hold on. Disclaimer. Show is for adults only. Please, no grandparents, no kids. Kick them out. If they're around, press pause. All right? That's your final warning. All right, so he's home alone with his stepdad. Stepdad orders him to jerk him off. Steve's 10. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. So the stepdad's barking orders at him what to do with the guy's dick, and he finally does it. Terrible scene, but Steve explained that it never happened ever again. And Steve equates it to sort of like prison power, like there was a lot of who's in charge, with the stepdad, the mom, and Steve. So he kind of equates it to like in prison, like I did this to you, I made my mark on you, I'm the boss, that kind of thing. Even before this abuse with the stepdad, there was this pedophile guy in the neighborhood. And he would just kind of lurk around and try to get kids to do shit. And there was this one time when this pedophile character in the neighborhood was like sort of like leaving how you would leave a trail of cheese for a mouse. He was leaving a trail of ripped out pages from a lingerie magazine for Steve to follow, right? Follow him, get in the pages, and finally. Then Steve realized, wow, you're trying to get me to go to your lair, your little hideout. And you figured it out, and he ran off. So, after this abuse by his stepfather, he had another run-in with this pedophile guy in the neighborhood, and he eventually let the guy suck him off. And even though he was too young to ejaculate, like it still happened. And Steve, at this point, Steve was so like beyond care, his abused so much. He's like, I don't give a shit, go ahead, if you want to do that, fine, I don't even know what you're doing. It's horrific. But Steve explains that music was what really saved him. He talks about this one time. He recalls when a neighbor right next to him had a little record player and was playing Purple Haze, and he could hear it through the window, and like he would stop what he was doing and just put his ear, turn to the window and listen. Purple Haze. And when the song was over, he would like yell out, play it again. So music is what he got into. Another thing he really liked was shoplifting. By age 12, his thievery had graduated from stealing model trains to now stealing bicycles and mopeds. He had in his basement, he had like a collection of bicycles. And he's also a good dresser. Like the kid likes to sneak in and steal some good clothes from shops and stuff. And he refers to this ability to thieve as his cloak. Like you put the cloak on, you can't see me. And this goes on all the time. He discovers masturbation, which is something that for him exists about 5 times a day. And he also enjoys becoming a peeping Tom. The little neighborhood that he lives in, there is like, in his backyard, there's like a fence, and there's like an area, I guess in the States we call it Lover's Lane, where, you would drive in and make out with your chick or whatever, and he would, lean over the fence and watch and have a little wink. I think Steve's a funny guy, though. Looking in this book, he's saying he's never told anybody any of this shit, And in the book, he talks about how he says, he He says, there's not a shelf in the library high enough for this shit, is there? This is the good stuff. You just don't get that from the guy from Nickelback. At least not so far as I know. Oh, this book came out this autobiography came out in 2017. That's when I think that's around the time when Nickelback was like the funny joke. Poor Nickelback. Anyway, I like another quote he gives about his teenage years when he became obsessed with Rod Stewart. All right, if you're a Rod Stewart / Faces fan, you'll know exactly what he's talking about. If you don't know, just fast forward 10 to 15 seconds, okay? So he says, I was already convinced Rod was a star because Gasoline Alley was so fucking good. I loved First Step and Long Player, the two Faces albums that came at either side of it too. The great thing about the whole arrangement from my point of view was that you got twice as many albums to listen to if you count the third Faces LP and A Nod is as Good as a Wink to a Blind Horse and Rod's next album, A Never Dull Moment, which I certainly did, as they were just as good. That's 5 brilliant albums Rod released in the space about 2 years. I agree with you, Steve. Amen. Let me buy you a beer. Yes, absolutely. All right, the non-Rod Stewart fans, Faces fans, all right, let's keep going, okay? You don't know what the hell I was talking about. Also, around this time of Steve's teenage years, 1972, New York Dolls come to play to open for the Faces. We talked about this for the New York Dolls episode. And Steve Jones was there. And Steve Jones is like, wearing all this cool clothes. He's able to sneak backstage, hanging out with Ron Wood, guitarist from Faces, and they're drinking champagne together. Security comes in, and then, Steve's thinking, oh, fuck, they're going to kick me out. And no, they just look at him and keep going, like he looks like he's in one of the bands. All right. Anyway, Steve starts a band with some friends, and they find out where Ron Wood lives. They go there, they see him, they wave, he waves back, One day, he goes back to the Ron Wood's house, he sneaks in, he steals a portable TV and a jacket, which turned out to belong to Keith Richards, who later would admit to hearing such thievery, would say, hey, that was mine. Steve's like, fuck it, whatever. He equates it as like the same thing with Beatlemania. Fans would try to rip your hair out or rip your clothes off. I was just stealing their stuff. He's a master thief. You're not safe. Like, put away your guitar. Don't fucking walk away if the guy's in the same room as you. All right, Steve's also a car thief. He's a car thief as well. One time he's talking about when he was chased by the cops, and the cops were trying to overtake his... he was in a stolen Austin Healey. He was with an unnamed friend, and he explains that he was able to escape the car, get out, run for it, and get away. And he says that was like the best feeling ever, to get away from Old Bill. Old Bill is would you say, call the cops in England. So he said that if they had caught us, they would have beaten the shit out of us, but not for ramming them, but for having a better car than them. All right. He is also a very sexual young man. He's constantly letting older men, coworkers, strangers give him blowjobs. And he explains that his thoughts are that he says that there's people who can just sniff out this hypersexuality. And he also likes sticking his dick into vacuum cleaners. He's very obsessed with this kind of thing. It's like a hobby. Steve-O. All right, he gets caught sometimes, though. He likes to steal, but, he's under 18. But he does get caught, and he does some time here and there. He does... Every once in a while, he'll get caught, and they'll throw him in. Let's see. So he has his bedroom is like full of like cool stereos. It's full of clothes. He's like living a great life. Like, either getting caught or not getting caught, he's able to walk away and keep loading up. So I've always wondered about this one. So he talks about how, because like if you're a Sex Pistols fan, they covered the Substitute by The Who and What You Gonna Do About It by the Small Faces, and I always wondered like why do they want to do those songs? And it turns out that Steve Jones and Paul Cook, who will be known as Cookie, that's how he calls him in the book, were into a mod phase at one point, and they were too late to become original mods and too early to do the mod revival, like the 78, 77, 78, 79 mod revival. Okay. This is 1974, 1975. Malcolm McLaren and Vivienne Westwood have their clothes shop called Let It Rock, and then they changed the name to Sex. Steve Jones works there, and he really sort of like a brother relationship with Malcolm McLaren, and sort of like a mother-son relationship with Vivienne Westwood. They really take him under their wing. They buy him a healthy toothpaste. They take him to vegetarian restaurants, things like that. He's really become really good pals with Malcolm McLaren. He looks up to him, and Steve's funny. He talks about how he's owning his own car. It's he called it like a shag wagon. It's a van that he put a mattress in the back of. First things first, right? All right, but he says he talks about how getting his license in England, Paul Cookie, was saying how you're going to have to study like a lot. And he's like, fuck it, I'm not going to study. I'm just going to drive without it. And he talks about, here, quote says, I wouldn't ever be legal on roads until more than 10 years later after I moved to California. The driving test in America is a piece of cake. You just have to answer a few questions, get around the block without killing anyone. Basically, a chimpanzee could pass it. In fact, I think it was specifically designed by the American automobile industry to ensure that morons would still be able to drive cars. All right, so let me go to 1974. This is the farewell tour of Ziggy Stardust, David Bowie. Steve Jones is a huge Bowie fan. What better way to express your love to your hero? What better way but to steal his shit? God, this fucking guy. He gets that van, right, and he backs it up towards the venue. I think he says it was like the last night, or like the night before the last night of the show. I think he says it was the last night before the show because the live recording was on the last show, and it was bad. It was a bad recording because it was shitty equipment that they had replaced with the stuff that he stole. Anyway, he backs up his van. He just strolls in there. He says he's using the cloak. He strolls in there, acting like a roadie, and he steals the guitars, the microphones, the amps, and this is what... this is the Sex Pistols gear. That's how the Sex Pistols got their fucking gear. Stolen from David Bowie. Poor guy. Anyway, he thieves here and there. He turns 18, but he gets caught and he gets put away. All right, he gets put away in an adult prison. And this is not a kiddie prison. This is like some fucking, scary adult, like murderers and rapists, shit like that. Lucky for him, Malcolm McLaren sweet-talked the judge, saying like, oh, you don't understand, this young guy, he's at the beginning of a fruitful, artistic, creative life. Let him out. I'll be his mentor. So yeah, the judge let him out. All right, Malcolm McLaren puts together a band called, this is 75, 76, puts together a band called Cutie and the Sex Pistols. Eventually dropping the little cutie part, just Sex Pistols. So Glenn Matlock is the bass player. He was the guy that was working at the shop Sex on Saturdays, so they knew him. He goes on to play bass. He's going to be the bass player. He eventually gets kicked out of the band because he's not really like the other guys. He's kind of like more of an upper class upbringing, and they never really get along with the guy. He's all right, but they're like, he wasn't really one of us. John Lydon is the lead singer, who would be known as Johnny Rotten. Steve Jones, on the case of his rotten teeth, they called him Rotten. Okay, I'm not going to do too much Sex Pistols stuff because we already know it. All right, so eventually they put out a want ad in Music Magazine Melody Maker, because they Steve Jones isn't cutting it, as much on a guitar. He's practicing and everything, but it's just not doing it. So they put out a want ad that they want to get like a whiz kid guitar player. They have a couple of auditions, nothing really hits. But I just want to share this quote. I thought it was kind of funny. So Steve says, with one of the auditions, he says, there was also a kind of hippie rock guy who could play his ass off. The only downside with him was he was so obviously high on smack while he was playing. I wish I could find out who he was and whether he went on to do anything else afterwards, because he was an excellent guitarist, even though it felt like a massive waste of time while it was going on. I don't know, I thought that was funny. I think wastes of time are funny sometimes. Anyway, so what they realized was they played a gig, and they had they finally had some monitors so they could actually hear the lead singer, Johnny Rotten, and they realized like this guy can't fucking sing, and so great, fuck it. Steve Jones can't fucking play guitar. This works fucking well. So they moved on. That was the fucking band. Rock and roll. Sex Pistols. Let's fucking do it. I want to point out, I think I said this before, that all the Sex Pistols were stolen. Sex Pistols equipment was stolen. The guitars, the amps, and everything. So you don't want to become enemies with Steve either. So he's talking about how one time the Sex Pistols played a gig with a band called the Doctors of Madness. So they're playing a gig up in Northern Ireland. This is 76. And the Doctors of Madness wouldn't let the Sex Pistols use their monitors. Steve Jones got kind of pissed off about that, so he went backstage and stole all of their wallets. That is what Steve does. He likes to fuck your girlfriend, and he'll steal your girlfriend and fuck her. He's also a peeping Tom, so if he didn't steal your girlfriend, he'd be spying on you while you're fucking your own girlfriend. That's fucking Steve, man. Steve-O! All right, 1976, Sex Pistols are doing little tours all over England. 1976. See, I'm going to stop at 77. You know the story. They cover songs No Fun by the Stooges, Substitute by The Who. They also do, their original songs, Anarchy in the UK, blah, blah, blah. Malcolm McLaren has them play at these, union workers hall buildings, where, guys that just got off work with mustaches and bell bottoms and working. What these guys really want to hear, taking care of business. That's what they want to hear. They don't want to hear the Sex Pistols. So Malcolm McLaren, he's an artist, and his paint, his chalk, his paints are the Sex Pistols. So these worker guys are throwing bottles at them, spitting at them. Fuck you. Steve-O. Steve is a sad case, though. He talks about how during this musical time, 1976, he started hooking up with this German girl who was supposedly Jimi Hendrix's girlfriend from at one point. And she's really into Steve and buys him a flying V guitar, buys him stuff, I like you, that kind of thing. And this pisses off Malcolm McLaren because he was like, I don't want any external influence. No, you got to go. And it's kind of sad because Steve explains how This is his quote. I can't be intimate with anyone because I'm always just looking for more. I only get attracted to strangers. That's my thing about making love. It's about fucking someone in the alley or paying a hooker. That's what turns me on. When there's fucking, but when feelings are involved, fuck it, I'm done. So it's too bad, right? It's kind of like this. I need to rob from you before you can have an attempt to rob anything from me. That's I think that's what it goes back to with his original the stepfather thing. He does have an ego though. He really thinks highly of himself. He's like this sort of punk rock lead guitar master Rod Stewart kind of guy strutting around. But yeah, he has it. He has the moves. I'm gonna wrap this up now with where Steve himself explains where the Sex Pistols really ended. So it all ended with the Bill Grundy show. So the Sex Pistols had a interview on sort of like a morning talk show called the Bill Grundy Show. It was some day in January, the beginning of 1976, and Steve explains that up until this interview, no one really knew who they were. They were gaining a following, let's see. Other like people like would come to see them, like what the fucking Joe Strummer. Joe Strummer saw the Sex Pistols. Okay, I'm talking about before the January of 1976 Bill Grundy. Joe Strummer from the Clash saw them, was like, I gotta do a band. Paul Weller from the Jam saw the Sex Pistols live and says, fuck it, I gotta do a band too. It was a thing. And then this Bill Grundy TV show, where it's just like a talk show in the morning, and the Sex Pistols throw a couple cuss words here and there. It's silly. You can see it on YouTube. I'm 100% positive I mentioned it with the New York Dolls episode, Bill Grundy, Sex Pistols. But anyway, he says after the Bill Grundy show, that was it. They're blacklisted. They were just like, it was nothing was the same ever again. So I'm going to wrap it up. So the Sex Pistols, okay, so after the Bill Grundy, they kick out Glenn Matlock, right? Because he's kind of lame. John Lydon doesn't like him. He's like a square. He's a mama's boy. And Malcolm McLaren brings in Sid Vicious, who was around. He was a good-looking guy who was always at the Sex, the store, And they put him in on bass, right? So Steve Jones's job was to teach Sid how to play bass. And he says, this is the most painful thing we've ever had to do. This guy knows nothing about playing music. But to Malcolm McLaren, it's not about fucking playing music. It's about the look, So they went through that. It just kind of imploded. After that, the whole concept of this, like, the term punk rock, no one even liked that term. That came from some journalist called like Carolyn Cook or something like that, and she referred to Johnny Rotten as the king of the punks. That's where it came from. And Johnny Rotten's like, what the fuck, dude? I'm like talking shit about monarchy. Don't call me a king. Anyway, the band imploded, blah, blah, blah. You know the story. So anyway, I'm going to stop it here because I want to tell the story, what's Steve Jones' life after the Sex Pistols? What happens after that? I just want to make a comment where, because like Sid Vicious was always wearing like the biker leather jacket. And so Steve Jones was talking about how after that Bill Grundy and with the Sid Vicious edition, it was like all these dipshits started wearing the leather jacket, and like people, he would say that when he would go to the Sex When I say sex shop, it means the name of this shop is sex. You would go to the sex shop. It used to be cool. You used to talk to interesting people. Now the people that come, they're fucking dipshits. Like, it sounds like morons and shit. Anyway, so it just kind of died. And I was listening to I was doing some homework, and I was listening to Steve Jones's podcast called Jonesy's Jukebox, where he was interviewing Chrissie Hynde from the Pretenders. They were friends back in the day. Chrissie Hynde was a friend of the Sex Pistols. And they were just talking about how it only lasted for like 6 months. 6 months of like this like pure energy rock and roll shit that they deemed punk rock. That's it. 6 months. That was it. It was over. It was a flash in the pan, really. Anyway, that's where I'm gonna end it. That's Steve Jones Part 1, and we're gonna come back for what is the post Sex Pistols life of Steve Jones. He's a good guy. I like him. He's a funny guy. He is at Jonesy's Jukebox. Anyway, if you like this podcast, if you like this episode, give me 5 stars, give me a comment, give me something like that, and eventually I'm going to have some website where I say, hey, go to jaysrockandrollstories.com. Anyway, glad you're listening. I'm going to come back as long as you keep coming back. All right, have one on me. All right, you guys take care. See ya.